it's so much more to it than that. Nothing wrong with using the score as a reference in a conversation. I saw a 10-point down there in the cornfield by the fence row. How big was he? Well, he's a 140-inch deer. That's fine, but that shouldn't be the only thing we're thinking about. There's too much of that, because I'm telling you, I've been producing TV for Mossy Oak since we had a TV show. And one of my major thoughts from day one was don't offend anybody. And I ain't talking about anti-hunters. The guy that works down there at the gravel plant, or the guy that works at the paper mill, or the lady who checks it. I don't want to just put so many big deer in their face that they lose interest and go, you know what? I ain't never going to see one. I'm going to play golf, or I'm going white perch fishing. You want them to take the whole experience in. Your buddies, the getting ready's half the fun. The venison, which is still at the top of my totem pole. We don't talk about that kind of stuff enough.
Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 225. Cuz Strickland, Mossy Oak, and the Adrenaline Shakes. Please support our sponsors as they make this show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Black Ash Outdoor Products. Reduce your risk of tree stand suspension trauma with a Tree Stand Wingman, the Tree Stand Emergency Descender System. The Enforcer. Take control of your odor footprint with your personal ozone generator. The Rack Packer. Don't drag your deer out of the woods like a caveman. Never drag a deer again. No need to kill yourself dragging a deer when there's the Rack Packer. Use the promo code BIGBUCK, BIGBUCK, at checkout to earn free shipping at $23 value. Go to therackpacker.com. Covert Scouting Cameras. Remote cameras for hunting, wildlife, and security. The Horny Buck Seed Company. It's all about the freshest seed. Morse's Sporting Goods. A full line of sporting goods without the sales tax. Northwoods Common Sense. New England's finest whitetail deer lures, 100% fresh, pure, and undiluted. And Big Buck merch for only $19.99. You can get a cool, high-quality Big Buck t-shirt and show support for this podcast by visiting www.bigbuckregistry.com/MERCH. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hey, this is Hal Blood from Big Woods Bucks, and you're about to push play on my favorite podcast, the Big Buck Registry.
This is John Lau, Executive Director of TMA. You're fixing to listen to the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hey, this is Matt Ross from QDMA, and you're listening to one of my favorite podcasts on the internet, the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow predators. My name is Jay, and thank you for tuning in to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. For Dusty Phillips and Jim Keller and the entire staff here at the Big Buck Registry, welcome to this week's show. There are a couple things I'd like you to do for us if you could. If you would, please check us out on iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review. With your help, we're going to try and push this show up the iTunes charts. I know we have a lot of listeners out there, and I need you to take some action. I need you to leave a review and subscribe to the show. If you do subscribe, that'll give you access and notification each and every week that a new show is released. You can also access this show in its entirety on YouTube, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and Google Play. It's all right there for you to access on demand at your fingertips. Regarding the harness program, we have an ample supply of harnesses to give away from our volunteer donors. If you're in need of a full-body harness, please send an email to j@bigbuckregistry.com. When I first received an email from Ronnie Strickland, I wasn't sure, but I thought, could this be Ronnie Cuz Strickland sending in fan mail to our podcast? Turns out it was Cuz. Cuz has been around the outdoor industry scene for quite some time now. You may remember the television show Mossy Oaks Hunting the Country back in the 90s. I was as much a fan of that show back then as Cuz is a fan of this podcast today. Cuz was one of the first employees of Mossy Oak when he joined the team back in 1987 and worked with Toxie Hayes to develop the media production department. Today he serves as Senior Vice President of Media Services, and Cuz still maintains a hands-on through the viewfinder approach to outdoor television production, spending more than 100 days afield each year. He has written several books, was the National Wild Turkey Federation's Communicator of the Year in 2010, and is a lifetime member of the NRA and numerous conservation organizations. We'll turn to our interview with Cuz Strickland in just a moment, but before we do, let's turn to Jim Keller for the Deer News.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News. Our first story this week, local animal rights group launches online petition to end lethal deer cull program. This story is from the MichiganDaily.com website and was reported by Ishi Mori. A local animal rights group launched a Change.org petition yesterday protesting the Ann Arbor City Council's decision to continue Ann Arbor's lethal deer management program. The petition reached 360 supporters as of Sunday evening. The petition, which was started by the Friends of Ann Arbor Wildlife and Nature, or FAWN, argues City Council mismanaged municipal funds to support a program that, in FAWN's perspective, was unnecessarily cruel and had limited success in controlling Ann Arbor's deer population. Ann Arbor's deer cull program has divided city residents from its inception 3 years ago. Supporters, including the University of Michigan biologists, assert it is the most effective way in dealing with vehicle collisions, risk of Lyme and chronic wasting diseases, and ecological damage stemming from deer overpopulation. Opponents criticize the program as violent and accuse City Council of not being transparent in its public dealings. According to a 2016 survey, 54% of the residents approve the use of lethal hunting methods. Every City Council member shares this view, and each of whom voted against a budget amendment that would have defunded the deer management program earlier this year. 45% of residents were opposed. In addition, according to the same survey, 61% of residents supported a non-lethal method such as contraception, trapping, and sterilization, regardless of their views on employing lethal methods. However, the city not only increased the projected number of deer it will cull this year, but also decreased funding for non-lethal operations. Moreover, the City Council eliminated a rule in which sharpshooters cannot shoot within 450 feet of an occupied building or residence without the owner's permission, heightening fears that bystanders may be injured or killed. However, White Buffalo Incorporated, the contractor that the city hired for culling operations, maintains the nonprofit sharpshooters have operated in other areas without the 450-foot rule without incident over the past 2 decades. Aaron Brodkey, co-president of the Michigan Animal Respect Society, shared the petition on multiple social media pages, including pages for the University of Michigan class of 2018, 19, and 20. He said he has worked with FAWN since a member of the organization contacted him after a protest in January to bring awareness to this issue. Brodkey said the issue directly affects students because of the location where some of these culling operations are happening. However, Jim Kostiva, Community Relations Director for the told the Daily in a previous article involving a separate anti-cull petition that university property has suffered environmentally and financially unsustainable damage through deer grazing. First ever CW deer case in Montana. This story is from the Outdoor News website and was taken from the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Report. A chronic wasting disease sample collected by Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in late October from 100 killed deer was found to be suspect for chronic wasting disease. The sample was collected from a mule deer buck harvested in Hunting District 510 south of Billings. The animal was killed in an area with a mixture of private and public land 10 miles southeast of Bridger. A second sample collected from the animal is being sent to the lab at Colorado State University for further testing, with the results expected next week. If the result is positive, it will mark the first time CWD has appeared in wild deer, elk, or moose in Montana. FWP has notified the hunter who submitted the suspect sample and landowners in the area where the deer was harvested. Though typically it takes one sample test to determine whether an animal is positive for CWD, that wasn't the case here. Though the animal is considered suspect at this point, it is very rare that a suspect sample isn't ultimately found positive. Therefore, FWP is moving forward as if the deer were ultimately to be determined positive for CWD. We've suspected it wasn't a matter of if, but when CWD would show up in Montana, said Ken McDonald, FWP Wildlife Division Administrator. Fortunately, we've done a lot of work to prepare for this and are hopeful the prevalence will be low as we work toward managing the disease. Deer gores unarmed hunter to death. This story is from the New York Post website and was reported by Jackie Salo. A deer gored a hunter to death with its antlers while the man was on an expedition in France, according to reports. Régis Levasseur, who was not armed, was killed Monday at Compiègne National Park, which is 53 miles northeast of Paris, local France reported. Police said the 62-year-old hunter was serving as a beater helping corner the game when the animal charged at him in an uncommon attack. The deer stabbed him with its antlers, causing the man to die from internal bleeding at the scene, according to authorities. Guy Harley, president of the local Hunters Federation, said that generally deer are more inclined to run away in such a situation. Normally the animal would flee, but this time he decided to charge, Harley told local France. The antlers of the stag are like many knives piercing you. There is nothing you can do. Levasseur was remembered as a seasoned hunter. For him, hunting was more than a hobby. It was his life, Harley said. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thank you to Jim Keller for the Deer News. Without further ado, here is Cuz Strickland. Cuz Strickland, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
Man, I'm good. I feel like I've hit the big time. I'm such a fan. I'm thrilled to be here, and I mean that.
You've hit the big time. I feel like I've hit the big time. You called me, and I was like, man, somebody actually knows who we are. This is cool.
Well, I called you really. My whole reasoning behind that was that you hooked up with Dave Politis, and that took place. So, but I told you I discovered you guys driving back from New Mexico, and what a great job you do. And I feel honored that you asked me to be on there. I actually didn't invite myself. I was trying to set you up with a couple of other really good interview subjects.
And I appreciate that. I'm always in search of good content and good interviews and good people to have on the show. And when I saw your name come across my screen, I wasn't sure if it was you. I'd either assume there would be other Ronnie Stricklands out there. I said, I wonder if this is Cuz Strickland talking to me here. My whole day lit up, man. It was exciting to say, hey, all right, I'm going to invite Cuz to be on my show. And sure enough, you said yes.
Well, I appreciate it. Like I say, I'm doing backlogs right now. I'm such a fan of hunting in general, but I'm also a fan of guys who push that message forward. I know how much work it is to do what you guys do, and so I'm honored to be here. I promise you.
It is a lot more work than I anticipated when I first started this. I'll have to admit.
One of these days you're going to join that club of the 30-year overnight success guys.
Right. I've heard that story a few times now. So, everybody thinks we just kind of came on the scene and became successful, but they forgot about the other 25 years we put into this, where we were living, out of a soup can.
And if you paid yourself by the hour, you'd be shocked. Like,
right.
Golly, I need to do something else.
Right.
So, my hat's off to you for prolificating that message, which we all need to do in this day or time.
I agree. I appreciate that too. What? How did you discover the podcast? I'm curious.
I pulled over. I was coming. I went to New Mexico and went elk hunting with the Primos crew. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big Fox News guy and all that, but I was filling up with gas and I hit YouTube and I just punched in hunting podcasts. And I was just kind of thumbing through, and boom, I saw Barry Winsel's name, and I said, I'm stopping right there. And it happened to be your podcast with Barry Winsel.
Right.
And of course, I listened to every word of that, and then I subscribed and bookmarked everything. And I actually did 16 hours of the Big Buck Registry from Wagon Mound, New Mexico to Houston, Mississippi. If you can believe that, I did. So
that's a lot of airtime right there.
That's a lot of airtime, but it's better than listening to the news sometimes.
Yeah, I enjoy podcasting, and I enjoy listening to podcasts too. And it's an interesting format, and I think it's finding more people each day.
Yeah, well, I'm one of the old guys who have embraced technology, including social media, although my 11-year-old, she's 13 now, but my granddaughter got me started on social media. She came into the house one day. She said, Pop, I'm going to open you an Instagram account. And I'm like, okay. And she showed me how to do it, and I could follow her. I had one follower, and that was her. But I would look at, and of course, they only live 30 minutes away, but I got to see cool photos that I wouldn't have seen. And she came back in a couple of weeks and she said, "How do you like Instagram?" I said, "I enjoy following you." And she said, "Well, you're pretty well known. I'm going to make you public." And I said, "Okay." And it just blew up. But I love looking at the photos and stuff. So I did Instagram for a year or two, and then I got me a Facebook page. So I've kind of embraced the social media because that's where it's going, like it or not. And if you're old, you just better learn how to function in that world, just like podcasts.
Right. Yeah, I'm 46 years old, and I always feel like I'm right on that cusp of whether I should or should not embrace this new media. And I guess it's not so new anymore, but should I be a Facebook person? Should I be a YouTuber? Should I be a podcaster? I'm kind of on the other side of that, where all the, you think of this kind of stuff being a young person's game. I don't think I'm young anymore, but yet I still enjoy it and like it. And hey, I understand the value that it's bringing, and because the message can be delivered so readily.
Yeah, Instagram's my favorite because it's 90% photos, and the people that follow me are, I'd say, 95% hardcore hunters. So I enjoy looking at the pics without having to say, "Hey, I'm stopped to get me a cup of coffee," or something stupid like that. But,
right.
It's part, if you're in the hunting industry and you want to be in contact with people, it's not a bad idea. I don't post very much controversial stuff, hardly no politics or anything like that. It's all about Mossy, hunting tips. What am I doing? And people seem to be interested in that for whatever reason. So I've kind of embraced it, but I didn't need anything else to do. I just felt like I needed to do it.
Right. Right. If you're not plugged in these days, you're not really hitting too many people if you're not plugged into the social media somehow.
Yeah, I got a little YouTube channel too, and I've learned that if I put something up on that YouTube channel between Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all that, and the shares, I'll end up getting about as many views as that, almost, as you get on television. It's a powerful thing that's going on right now.
That is fascinating, isn't it? What a
it is
change we've come in 20 years. What a difference.
Oh, it's crazy. We launched our first TV show here at Mossy Oak in 1995 on TNN, and I'm probably getting back before you were involved. This is way over your head. I'm much older than you. But
although I know what TNN was, I remember the TNN days. Now that's when I was a fan and not a producer of sorts. I'm still a fan, but now I'm producing some stuff. But yeah, back then I consumed that stuff night and day.
It was the national network. All it had was it had rodeo, hunting and fishing, NASCAR, country music, and the ratings, the viewership on that was just unbelievable. Our show in its peak on TNN aired Sunday nights, and we would get true Nielsen ratings Tuesday morning, and the numbers were staggering. And nowadays, there's like 3 full-time 24-hour networks, and there's 600 or 700 shows. So everybody's fighting for that little piece of pie. So you need to throw social media in there, podcasts and everything else to get your message out.
Yeah. I remember that. Actually, the way back, and I think it was TNN, TBS. I can't remember which channel it was, but I used to, as a kid, watch a lot of fishing television. I liked the hunting television when I could catch it, but I could always, I think it was Jerry McInnes or something.
Jerry McInnes, yes. The Fishing Hole.
The Fishing Hole. That was my favorite show on television, and it was because I could find him going to fishing holes that had trout in them, and I was more of a trout fisherman than a bass fisherman because my grandfather always took me trout fishing because that's where we'd go. We'd go find these little native brook trout in the brooks around my house, and that's what we did.
Well, Jerry McInnes was a storyteller back before anybody knew you should be a storyteller. And what fascinated me about his show, along with some of the other fishing shows, is if you think about it, 99% of the action takes place underwater where you cannot see it.
Right.
So you got to be kind of really good at your craft to make a fishing show entertaining, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah.
What about your childhood, Cuz? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Natchez, Mississippi, which is kind of in the southwest corner. My dad was a 20-year military guy, but loved to fish. He was the best fisherman I ever knew, and he never owned a boat, but that was his thing. He loved to fish, and that's what we grew up doing was fishing. The small amount of hunting we did early on was squirrel hunting, because what we would do is we'd go squirrel hunting out in the Homachita National Forest, all public land, and we would kill the squirrels. Of course, we'd eat them back then, make dumplings and stuff, but we used to sell the tails to the MEPS lure company. I know you know what a MEPS is.
Oh, yeah.
But they
crazy.
would buy the squirrel tails for 25 cents each. And all you do is cut them off, let them dry, put them in almost, boom. They'd send you your whatever it was, $4, $3, $5.
Right.
So that's where I really got hooked on hunting, was small game. Wasn't a whole bunch of deer back in the late 60s, early 60s in the Homachita National Forest. And of course, they've come on, but I like the hunting way more than I did the fishing. So that's kind of how I got my start in hunting. I leaned more. I had an older brother who's still a fishing nut. And I just kind of fell in love with the whole aspect of hunting, because we settled in Natchez after a good bit of, you can imagine 20 years in the military moving around. And
sure.
Natchez was a great place to grow up if you wanted to hunt and fish. Right on the Mississippi River, could go across the river and go up and down the levees, which the Corps of Engineers built the levee system along the river digging. And when they would dig the dirt for the levees, they made what we call bar pits. And anytime the river would flood, it would flood those bar pits, which would in turn stock them. And it was all public land. So we grew up fishing up and down the Corps Engineer levee, and lots of good hunting and fishing where I grew up.
Yeah.
So I've always been into it.
Was the fishing based around catfishing? I mean, I always think of Mississippi.
No, it was. Yeah. That's one of the stereotypes. It was, largemouth bass, white perch, crappies, sockeye, whatever you want to call them, and brim. But my dad was so good at it. He used to, I'll never forget, he had a barometer, old style barometer in the living room. He watched that thing like a hawk. And he watched the river stages. When you live right next to the Mississippi River, that's a big deal. And at certain times when it would start flooding those bar pits, he would know, all right, we got to go. And it would be like water going over the roads in between the bar pits, and you could stand there and catch bass until your arms ached. But he just figured all that stuff out. And he loved to fly fish for brim, which we didn't have trout down here, but he still loved the whole aspect of fly fishing. Of course, we used popping bugs. We didn't use flies, but he was just really into it. So it was amazing to have his tutelage, as a young fisherman anyway.
That's cool. That's really cool. Do you recollect your first hunting experience?
I do. Other than the squirrel hunts, my dad was a kind of a visionary guy, and he started this thing down in our town called the Junior Sportsman's Club. This had to be in 1962 or 63. And the Junior Sportsman's Club was a group of dads who would bring kids, and we'd also go get other kids who didn't have a dad that hunted, and we would do outdoor activities like sometimes it was a rabbit hunt. Sometimes we would go to the trap thing. We just had an old two brick house trap thing that would throw skeets and stuff. And one of the things they got us into was archery, which it was all recurves back then. But man, when the first time I shot that recurve bow, I'm telling you, it just set me on fire. So the first deer hunt I can remember is when my brother got his driver's license, and we could go out into the Homachita National Forest. And certainly he did not want me to go because he was 4 or 5 years older than me. But I can remember being 12. They dumped me out on the side, him and his two buddies, to go to a good spot, and I was kind of left to fend for myself. But I can remember missing a deer the first time I ever went. I was like 12 or 13, had that old recurve bow, and saw I had a big doe come up looking straight at me, and I shot like 7 feet over its back. But I had to sit down because I can remember my right hand shaking for like an hour. It was like I saw a werewolf or something. It was the most adrenaline-packed thing ever. So as far as my first real hunting experience with big game, that would have been it. So
that adrenaline shake is something else, isn't it?
It's crazy. I'm 63 years old. Love to bow hunt. I've got a little farm. It's really nice. I've kind of got it tweaked, but when I first got it, it was fairly open. I started planting pines and got it covered. And anyway, on the third or fourth year in, I got a picture of a really, really nice deer. One photo. on September the 28th at 3 a.m. These deer down here are crazy. Never had another picture of it. I got trail cams everywhere. Anyway, that following December, it was the day before Christmas Eve. I went to a little food plot, about 1/4 of an acre. No big plans, hung my bow up. I always have a tiny video camera with me. That's just a habit I can't break. And I was videoing this little 5-point, a couple of does, and I put just a little wrist thing back my camcorder back in my pocket. I caught movement to the left.
Yeah.
And a doe kind of trotted out of the woods, and boom, there's this really nice buck. And you talking about divine intervention. I grabbed my bow with my left hand, which was hanging on my right side. My hand went through the wrist strap. I snapped the release on, and it just started shooting a release. Never looked at the loop. Came to full draw. The deer stopped, and I shot, and it ran back into pines. This is all in a period of just seconds.
Seconds, right.
So anyway, the deer ran off. I hung my bow back up, and I sat there, and that's when it hits me. My legs start shaking and all that. And I can remember vividly, I turned to my quiver to make sure there was an arrow missing to convince myself that it actually happened. I mean, I'm like 59 years old at the time. And I said, you know what? There's nothing that can get you going like that other than, maybe law enforcement or something. But it's always affected me like that. And I've come to fight through that adrenaline at the time of the shot through years and years. But man, at some point, I'm just going to start shaking. And at home down here, the bucks are so nocturnal. I don't know if they're nocturnal. The terrain is so thick.
Yeah. You
don't really see them like they do in the Midwest. So, about 90% of my action is going to be around nice, big, mature does. So when a doe steps out and, man, if she comes close enough, I'm going to whack it. It's just as bad. You would think it was a 180-inch deer. You start breathing heavy and you're right knee of shape. But it's I hope that never goes away. It hadn't yet. So
I have the same problem.
Yeah,
it can be a doe. It could be a coyote. I get that same adrenaline rush. It doesn't matter.
That's right. That's why I so admire the great archers of the world. Levi Morgan. Can you imagine 11 world championships and I do stuff with PSC and all that. And I've talked for hours with Pete Shepley, who goes into. This guy can shoot like you wouldn't believe it. I've never worried that much about form because in my experience, all that goes out the window. To me, when a deer's coming, I'm thinking of a couple of things, about where can I draw? How can I not be? But the last thing on my mind is form. I think it's got to be muscle memory at that point. And then picking the right time. And, that's the hard part, is getting drawn. So as much as I admire those guys who shoot so fabulously, I've never worried that much about form. I shoot a lot, but I want it to be muscle memory when that time comes.
Right. I do notice a much different situation when I've practiced routinely compared to when I haven't and I go to draw. There's something missing there. If I haven't been practicing, there's like a void and I get nervous. And I'm like, this should be a natural thing at this point. And sometimes if I haven't been practicing, it's not there.
Yeah, I wrote an article for I forgot what magazine it was now, back in the day, just called Keep It Simple, Stupid.
Yeah. And
it's the things I do bow hunting that muscle memory just falls into place because you got so much to think about when that moment of truth comes in. Back then, your number one thought was how far is it? Now you got rangefinders, but back then you didn't have any of that stuff. So I just learned to keep it simple and not complicate something that's already emotionally complicated to begin with.
Right.
So,
right. How often do you shoot your bow?
Back in the day, I used to shoot on and off a good bit year round. I'd take a pretty good break after hunting season because our season goes till the end of January, and turkeys has always been a passion of mine. So as soon as deer season's over, I'd be out, snooping and looking and all that. But as soon as turkey season's over, I'd try to shoot maybe once a week and then twice a week, and I'd shoot off and on all summer long. Now, what I didn't do was shoot a whole bunch of arrows. I would shoot, a dozen. Mm-hmm. And maybe 2 days later, shoot a dozen. I just like to keep those muscles in shape right there because, back in the day, you had to shoot so much poundage to get any, speed at all. I can remember I used to work in a sporting goods store, and I can remember this like it was yesterday. I was the Golden Eagle Archery Dealer of the Year one time. Golden Eagle don't even make bows anymore. But anyway, I had a round wheel compound bow.
Yep.
I had it set on 80 pounds.
Wow.
And I had a homemade overdraw. I was shooting arrows that were like 23 inches long.
Yeah.
And I got my hands on a chronograph from I think the guys had one at the National Guard Army. And I shot an arrow through that chronograph on that 80-pound bow with a 23-inch aluminum arrow, and it shot like 225 feet a second. And I said, it'll never be anything go faster than that.
Right.
There's no way. And now, one off the rack on 55 pounds is shooting 280 feet a second.
Right.
The technology's crazy now.
Yeah.
So
what a change since the early days of archery.
It's, it's been fun to watch because I used to rig bows and sell bows and at that sporting goods store, and I would cut them. I would cut the aluminum arrows with a copper tubing cutter, that you had to go around and around.
Yeah,
and when I inserted them, I had a stick of glue, and I'd use candles. And I can remember, leading up to bow season, I'd be up there at night trying to get enough arrows cut and inserted. And now they just got electric saws, and they use glue that you don't have to heat. And, but I was glad. I've always been fascinated and thankful that I kind of got to see the whole journey, because I was into it big time when the first compound bow I got my hands on came out, because I was a terrible recurve shooter. I think that some of that's a gift, but I got the first compound bow and it had one pin on it, and I figured that pin out, and I said, I'm going to kill every deer in the county. They don't have a chance. So, of course, that wasn't the case, but I've loved to see the technology. It's a little of it's over my head now when you're talking about air spline and things like that. But I got into it pretty deep. We shot 3Ds, and I actually shot in the Tropicana indoor thing, the PAA one time. Of course, that's 20 yards indoor, and I was shooting fingers. I don't even know if they have a class for finger shooters anymore, but it's been fun to watch that journey. I don't know, other than the trail camera, I don't know what's come along more than the compound bow that's changed the face of hunting any more than that.
Right. Kind of puts in perspective the recurve guys that predates any compound. Like it's kind of mesmerizing when you think about how simple the technology was, but the effective hunter back then, they had to be a real good hunter. Absolutely.
And I've heard you say it, and of course, I crammed on your podcast, but Gene Winslow said something one time. I was blessed to share camp with those guys several times. I brought them to Texas, I brought them to Alabama, I brought them to Mississippi. And we were at a camp one time, and there was guys shooting back then. They were like shooting 40 yards and 50 yards, which is nothing now.
Right.
But Gene said, to me, archer's not about how far, it's about how close. And man, that just flew all over me, like so many things he does say. But I always feel like bow hunting is about how close.
Yeah.
Nothing against gun hunting. I mean, I'll shoot one with a rifle this year. I don't have a problem with any of that.
No.
But you're right, the traditional guys, and I've been around guys who are just truly instinctive. They'll tell you it's like throwing a football. Some guys aim down the air shaft, and some guys string walk. Where they'll bring their anchor point down below the nock a few inches at a time, and all that's fascinating to me. But the bottom line to me, and I wanted to fight through that and get really good with a recurve bow, and I didn't. And my number one priority is to be as lethal and as humane as I can be. And right now, that means a compound bow and a release aid. I could set that bow down and not touch it for a month and go pick it up and shoot one right in the dot, at 20 yards. So that's what I need to do.
Right. And I agree with you. And I love the Wensels. They are some of my favorite people to listen to because of their skill set. And I picked up a recurve a couple times. Just couldn't get it to take. Just didn't feel quite right. But the compound, and certainly the compound fixes a lot of those issues. But boy, do I have respect for the people that can do that right.
Yeah, and the ones that do it for all the wrong. I'll tell you a quick story. There's guys that do it because and I admire it. M.R. James, the publisher of Bowhunter magazine, good friend. I took him to Texas one time. He called me, and it was right at the end of the year, and I was really tired. I'd been lugging. Back then, the TV cameras, I can only compare them to an anvil. They were so big and so heavy, and it would wear you out.
Yep.
But anyway, he was going to this place down by it was a charred out hunk of the King Ranch down on the coastal part of Texas. And he wanted to kill a deer from the ground, spot and stalk. And I was like, man, yeah, I'm in Mississippi. I know what the odds are of that. But he was talking about how the coastal wind blows all the time and you can sneak on deer. And it is Texas. And it was M.R. James. So anyway, I went, picked him up at the airport. We get to this camp, and there's a guy there. And I ain't going to tell you where he's from. He was from up north. He had a traditional longbow and all this stuff. And I thought he was going to be pretty excited to meet M.R. James. And he's like, you're M.R. James. You started Bowhunter magazine and you're shooting a compound. And he just went off. It was some of the most rude. I was sitting there with my mouth open. And every day we'd come in from the hunt, and he would be there with his traditional bow and just ragging M.R. James, who's one of the nicest people you'll ever meet in your life. Yeah. And finally, on like the fourth day, MR was fixing to close the deal. I mean, we were so close. I was right over his shoulder. It was an 8-point buck, 22 yards. I'll never forget it. MR's ready to come to full draw, and I hear this rustling in the leaves, and I look to my right, and there's a blue indigo snake. And I don't know if you've ever seen one.
I've not seen one of those, no.
They're in Texas, and they're enormous. Huh. And I'm as scared of snakes as anybody you'll ever meet. Now, the blue indigo snake's not poisonous, but it didn't matter. This thing's 3 feet from me, so and when I made that little sound, of course, the deer ran off.
Right.
So now I'm in a bad mood. I've blown it. We get back to camp, and the traditional guy is right back on MR, and I just kind of snapped, and I said, let me ask you something. How'd you get down here? And he said, well, I flew into Corpus Christi. I said, what's traditional about a jet airplane? Are those Nikon binoculars or those Rocky boots? I said, you should have, handcrafted your own moccasins and walked down here. And by the way, shut up. It was like, and MR was just smiling like a, kid in a candy store. But I was like, that dude was hunting with a traditional bow for all the wrong reasons. I mean, you buy a hunting license and you bow by the rules. We're all teammates, buddy.
That's right.
So that's one of the favorite stories, because MR wouldn't say anything, but it's like, you know what? Do it. It's another Wenzel quote. It's not where or what or when you hunt. It's why. That's the important thing.
Right. The why.
Sorry to quote Gene again. Why? Why?
There's so many good ones. I don't mind a good Wenzel quote by any means. I think they're fascinating.
They are.
They're simple. A lot like the bear quotes, So
yeah, that's good stuff.
When did Ronnie become your official name, and Cuz became your friendly name?
I had a football coach / math teacher in middle high school, and I was so bad at math. And this guy had just moved to town, and he loved to hunt. So I started shaking him around, showing him the Homestead National Forest. I was kind of his little guide, and we were spending so much time together. Well, all of a sudden, my math grades are coming up magically. So he told everybody we were cousins. That's why we hung. And he would call me that from time to time. And there was very few people calling me that, because that was a long time ago. And then I was with Will Primos. I brought him to my house one time. I worked for him in 1980, like 83 and 84. And he heard a couple of guys say that. So that's all he called me from that point on. And it's been a fun nickname, easy to spell and easy to remember. And it seems to, put people at ease. Oh, that's old Cuz. So I've never minded it at all. So.
Yeah, it does have a calming effect. I like it.
Yeah.
That's funny you say that. So you got involved with Mossy Oak. And what were you doing before Mossy Oak?
I did a lot of things. I hard work builds character. I did a lot of things. I drove a milk truck. I used to deliver milk and I would make my last stop. I'll never forget it, at a place called the Second Creek Grocery out on Liberty Road down in Natchez, because it was only a couple of miles from the game reserve, the Homachita Forest. Boom, I'd take that milk truck going out to the Homachita National Forest. But delivered Cokes. Most of my life when I got married, I worked at a big warehouse. I worked for a guy named Alan Brown, who played football at Ole Miss and was a first-round draft choice for the Green Bay Packers, and has a Super Bowl I ring, but he was a big hunter. But when that job ceased, I went to work for a sporting goods store downtown, because I was going up there daily anyway, helping rig bows. I was fascinated with archery, and I ended up working there. And Will Primo's, I was buying turkey calls from him, and he was actually making them all himself at the time, these stacked turkey calls called a true double. And I worked for the sporting goods store, and that's when the first camcorder came into Natchez. It came into a Sears and Roebuck store, and a buddy of mine bought it, and we immediately camoed it up, went out, and I started filming turkey hunts with it. And I was sending these VHS tapes to Wilbur and showing him, hey, man, look what your true double did. And he shows up down there one day with this gigantic TV camera and all this stuff and says, you think you could film a hunt with it? And I said, I don't know. I'll give it a shot. And the next spring I was working for him full time, and that's when he did the first video, The Truth About Hunting, according to Will Primo. So that was my introduction into the big TV world. I'll never forget it. That first spring I shot that big video camera. I'd figured out how to record on it, got the audio, and we went to the edit studio, which was a big thing back then, and put that giant 3/4 tape, first one in the machine, and the edit guy was looking at it. He said, did you take a white balance? Because it was a little blue. I said, what's a white balance?
Right.
And, yeah. So he took me outside and showed me how to do that. My video got better, but I was kind of just thrust into the thing before it was popular. You know, it was like Will was a big visionary. So was Toxie Hayes, the guys that owns Mossy Oak. Yep. And Will wanted to share that, show people how to do it. And that was a little divine intervention, hooking up with him. And the next year, I went to the SHOT Show. I couldn't keep up with Wilbur. His office was in Jackson. I was in Natchez, and that's a 2.5-hour trip. He wanted me to move up there, and I just wasn't going to do it. I had little kids. And anyway, I met Toxie at the first SHOT Show they went to was in 1986. And my wife was with me. I was back at the sporting goods store, and she came and got me, said, there's two guys from Mississippi over here have a camo pattern. So we went way back in the back into the little booth section, and there's Toxie Hayes and Bill Sugg, the only two employees of Mossy Oak. Yep. They got like a 10-foot booth back in the dungeon. And I looked at that. I'll never forget this. I was walking up toward that booth, and I saw that bottomland pattern sitting there, and I was like, I could kill every turkey in the woods with that stuff on. So anyway, I walked up there and met Toxie and wrote an order, and went back to the sporting goods store, and I started calling all the dealers I knew, saying, you got to get some of this stuff. And I ended up selling more than he was. So he called me and said, dude, you got to go to work for us. You're selling more than I am. So that was he had incorporated in mid-year 86, and I went to work for him in January of 87 and have been there ever since. So
fascinating that there was a vision that we needed better camo out there.
It was, Jim Crumley was the first guy. Tree bark. I can remember buying a suit of tree bark, and I said, that's too gray for down here, and trying to dye it turned purple and all that kind of stuff. But Toxie was, he still is. He's a little ADD. He is a moving target, buddy. But when he gets his mind set up on something, it's unbelievable. And his dad and his big deal was turkeys. And that's his whole deal behind the Mossy Oak, was to be able to hide from turkeys, which have vision like you wouldn't believe. And when he got that first bottomland pattern, I tell you right now, and I love the new patterns. The technology's gone crazy, but if somebody sent me to the woods and said, somebody's going to kill you, a sniper, you got to hide, I'd want a one-piece bottomland jump-up suit, because I took pictures of that forever when we were building catalogs and all that. And if you sit still, it's a big deal, and it is a big deal. It's you see stuff today, and you see camel patterns on some of the technical clothing, and I just cringe because, sometimes they get it done, sometimes they don't. But, the blending in and breaking up your outline and all it's a big deal to people who have to get critters close. Duck hunters, predator hunters, turkey hunters, bow hunters. Camouflage is a big deal. That's why I make sure my hands are covered. I paint my face. I can't wear a head net because I need that kisser button, but that's a big deal and it helps. And sometimes you get to watching what happens on TV and you can say, well, that's the way to do it. If you go down in the woods down here where I hunt and you don't have your face and your hands camo, you ain't making a move to get drawn on a deer. If you do, it's a 1 in 50 because they're just naturally that wary. Yeah. So it's I've always believed that paying real close attention to your camo is just like playing the wind. It's a big deal.
Right. Are you fascinated by, and I am, that the camouflage has become almost fashionable beyond the hunter?
Yeah. I look at some of the patterns on television and I understand high performance clothing and all that. I really do, because I had to hunt in cotton and wool my whole life.
Right.
And you guys up there, I mean, y'all know what misery can be. So I'm all about some performance clothing. But you know what? When I get in a tree or I'm sitting down beside a tree, I'm wanting to blend in. I don't want light colors. And you can talk about rods and cones and whitetails' eyes and all that, but there's so much out there that can give you way other than a deer at 80 yards. It might be a bobcat or a bird or a hen turkey or something like that.
Right.
And it's got. I look at some of that stuff and I just shake my head, going, there, I would be caught dead in some of those really loud type patterns.
Right.
It's just, and maybe that's the old school in me, but it's really important. Attention to detail will help you way more than 10 more feet a second.
Right.
Or that new scope that's got extra reticles in it. And I just believe the old school guys were on to a lot. You can learn a lot from them, but camo is a big deal in the woods. And yes, it is kind of a fashionable statement. There was a time where you wouldn't wear it, outside the woods. And now it's kind of accepted everywhere, which that part is a good thing.
Right. Right. And people that don't hunt will wear some of these patterns. But definitely the people that hunt, or at least the people that I know that consider themselves country people, will wear it as routine T-shirts or routine gear, not even stepping a foot in the woods.
It's a uniform down here where I live.
That's
Trust
it.
me,
It is become the uniform.
That's right.
If you're part of the group.
That's right. It's not a big deal.
Right.
And, people are passionate about their hunting. All that's good. And I keep telling people, here's kind of where we're going wrong. I'll get on a tiny bit of a rant, not much, but
okay.
Right now is the perfect storm, because you got all these shows on major networks. And I'm talking 300 and 400 million viewers. Yukon Men, Alaska, all these Alaska shows, Life Below Zero, where they're killing caribou and moose and field dressing them, and people who have never hunted want to live not necessarily an off-grid in Alaska lifestyle, but they're really interested in that meat and eating healthier and stuff like that. And when you turn TV on, every commercial out there now is about a triathlete running up the cliff with a bow and arrow, and it's like, golly, you want to be more inclusive, not exclusive. So I posted a picture on Instagram the other day. Me and Jimmy Primo sitting at 8,200 feet. He's 69 years old and I'm 63. We both killed an elk. Mm-hmm. And I said, you don't have to be a professional triathlete to hunt. Get out here. So I believe you should be more inclusive and not exclusive.
Right. Good point. That's a very good point.
Mm-hmm.
When you first went to work for Mossy Oak, did Toxie ever talk about his vision or why he decided that the world needed a different camo pattern than what existed?
He hunted with his dad, Mr. Fox. His dad, if you look up Southern Gentleman in the dictionary, it should have his picture there. Fox Hayes is one of the most, he's a true Southern gentleman, loves to listen. He's old school. Mm-hmm. But they used to build blinds when they would go turkey hunting. He would make Toxie snip the limbs, drag them. Toxie said he got so sick of building blinds, he could scream and he wanted a camouflage that where if he sat still, he could fool those turkeys. So that was his deal. Now after that, and that was truly an artist rendering of what he had in his head, the first pattern. He uses vertical and elliptical shapes. And it sounds like a corny story, but I know it to be true. When he wanted to get the colors, he went to a guy who was converting fabric, and he had these plastic bags full of dirt and leaves and stuff. And he said, I want the brown to be this color, and I want the darker brown to be that color. That's how they came up with the colors for the original bottomland pattern. And after that, of course, the technology, it used to be an artist rendering. Now the technology is crazy. You may take 5,000 slides with a red camera and pull elements from each thing, and you can actually build a pattern on a computer screen. But back then, it was just the passion of him wanting to be literally invisible in the woods, and it was fun to be around that much energy. And he was serious about it.
Let's talk about doing some hunting. Actually, like, you've been at this thing for a while, and I'm sure you've learned a bunch of things over the years. You've probably made a bunch of mistakes, and that made you a better hunter. When you're going into the woods, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about the biggest deer in the woods? Are you thinking about, I just need to get in front of deer? What's your mentality like?
Yeah, well, the first thing I always look at is the wind. Another good technology we got now is your cell phone. I got so many weather apps, it looks like a computer when I pull them up. But I'm a big wind freak, as anybody that hunts whitetails would be. But I'm always checking the wind, and I've learned through the years there are better days than others. Back when I was younger, I didn't care what was going on. It could be raining. I didn't care. I went. And now I kind of pick and choose, and I've learned a lot from so many people you've never heard of. One of the guys there's two guys down at a place called Bent Creek Lodge in Jakin, Alabama. They got a lot of land, and their specialty is people who may get to hunt 3 days a year. They got like 300 food plots, and their food's just fabulous, but they specialize in a guy who's going to go sit in a shooting house and kill a deer or two and then go home. Mm. And Johnny Lanier, he's a veterinarian. He's got a notebook there. It's about an inch thick now, but he writes down every day the barometric pressure, the wind direction, everything you can think of. And then he asks each hunter when they come in what they saw and where it came out. And that guy knows more about deer movement than anybody ever seen in my life. It's crazy. So I love spending time around people like that and just asking them questions, about wind direction, deer movement, because those deer down in Alabama in the Black Belt, there's lots of them. They get hunted a lot, and he's they base their whole success of their business on wind direction and barometric pressure and cold fronts and stuff like that. So I'm checking the wind first, and if it's not too hot, I always try to set my stuff up for south wind or north wind, and you get variances on that, but just as long as I can keep that wind pretty close to in my face, I can keep myself entertained. So, that's the first thing I'm looking at, is the wind direction.
Okay. Are you a mobile hunter, or are you a preset stand kind of guy?
Well, I've turned into a preset stand kind of guy out of necessity. Mainly, I got 4 grandkids. 3 of them are boys, 10, 9, and 6. And let me tell you something, they are snipers. They love to deer hunt. So my whole world revolves around tiny food plots and pop-up tents now. But I got tree stands up on my place that I studied and studied and studied. And I leave the tree stands there for maybe 2, 3, 4 years. I'll take them down and move them from time to time, but I'm not moving them to get in a better spot. I think I'm in the pinch points and all that. Now, what I don't do is go to that same stand, 5 days in a row. I mean, I don't think they get used to seeing a stand there unless somebody's in it and they've had some kind of bad encounter there.
Right.
And I've heard people on your show talk about that and first time in and all that. But I literally have lock-ons on my farm. I won't hunt this whole season. I may go to them once. I may go to them in October, then again in January. But I think the fact that stand's already there, I can ease in there, climb up, pull my bow up, not make any sound. I hadn't been in there. I think that's a greater advantage than trying to sneak in there and hook a climb or whatever. At 63, I'm only going to work so hard,
right,
to kill a deer. I've killed a lot. So I think having the stands up, having them in good spots, I know what's going on. I think that's a big advantage. That's just my personal opinion.
Okay. Gotcha. What other things do you look at besides wind? It sounds like wind's number one. Are you looking a lot at barometric pressures and what
Yeah.
What do you decide is going to move a deer out of its bed?
Well, these deer down here, the cover's so thick, so you kind of got to have lanes or food plots or whatever. And there's a lot of rutting activity goes on that you can't see. Everything down here is planted pines, head high sometimes, terrible thickets and all that. But I can tell you this, when the barometer's getting up there in that 30.03, 4, 5 world, in that first day of high pressure, when the high pressure is right over your head and the wind's died down and the rain's gone through, you don't want to miss any of those days. Now, the moon has an effect on that. Unfortunately, I don't get to hunt by myself a lot, so I can't watch the moon all the time. But anytime the high pressure is right on top of you, and that's usually the second day after the storm goes through,
yep,
clearly, without a doubt, deer movement's going to be at a maximum right there, especially if it drops the temperature. And I'm not going to miss many of those days at all. So the barometer's a big deal.
Okay. So what's your perfect storm when you said this is the day we have to be out?
The perfect storm for me is a new moon. And down here, you kind of got to wait for the weather to get cool. I mean, we're in a cool snap right now, and I'm loving it. It's supposed to be like 40 degrees in the morning, but normally in October it's 68, 85. So that affects deer movement. I don't care if you're in I don't care where you're at. That affects the deer movement some. The one exception to that would be a little bit of cool weather before they cut the soybeans. Now, Foxy's got a saying, he's dead right. The best days to kill a big deer down here are the first 3 or the last 3. And he's probably right. And that's all food related, because before they get started chasing them and all that kind of stuff, you can catch them going into those soybean fields if you're slick. But the perfect storm to me is a really good cold front coming down from the north, a good Arctic blast. It's got a little moisture in it, and it's happening during a new moon, and it gets in and it gets on out and it drops that temp way down low.
Yep.
That second day of high pressure, I may hunt all day when it's like that. If it's in the 30s or 40s and that high pressure sitting right on top of me, and I don't know why deer do it, and I hear guys talking about hunting before front. I've never been able to time that. And again, this is Mississippi. This ain't Kansas. But I've always had way more luck a day and a half or so after that cold front comes through and that high pressure is right on top of you.
Right.
That's the perfect storm. And if it's in between the 15th and the 30th of December, man, that's as good as it gets right there. Because we've killed 3 or 4 really nice deer on my farm, and all 4 of them were either December the 23rd or December the 24th.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay.
The rut's in different places.
Yeah.
At different times. Down in Florida, they rut in late and mid-August or something down there. So they don't want their fawns to be born in the heat. So that rut is just different. It ain't like, you see television, it's those magic days, November the 7th, 8th, 9th. It ain't much going on down here November the 7th, 8th, and 9th, especially if it's 85. You kind of got the best way to figure out exactly when the rut is go talk to a guy that processes deer meat, because he don't care about, your knowledge or not. To ask him when his big bucks come in, and if he keeps records, and he probably has to, he can tell you within 5 or 6 days when all those big buck comes in. That's when the rut is in your area. You don't need a moon chart or a biologist.
That's a very good point. We make it more complicated than it really needs to be. I think, if you're going to a place to hunt for the first time, or if you've moved to a new place and you're trying to figure out what the pattern is, go talk to the butcher. He'll tell you exactly when it's going to happen, and it's going to happen year in, year out.
Let me tell you something. Nobody wants you to be more successful than he does.
Right.
He's going to give you good information, and his is going to be correct.
Yeah, that's a very good point right there. It's a very simplified answer, but boy, that's so precious.
Yeah.
You had mentioned talking about you had mentioned something about killing a big deer and how it changed your perspective on scoring an animal. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, it was, and I can remember I used to kill some pretty good deer. There wasn't as many deer hunters back then, and I got married very young. I got married when I was 19. Didn't have two nickels to rub together, but we ate a lot of venison and still do. But I killed 2 or 3 deer, and I was telling my wife, man, I need to get that mounted. She'd look at me like I was an alien because we didn't have whatever it was back then, $125. Mm-hmm. Well, I joined a hunting club. It cost $65, and I had to save for like 6 months. I joined the first hunting club I ever belonged to. We had an old school bus we fixed up. It wasn't but 4 or 5 of us. Anyway, on my one day off, this was November the 27th, 1981, I went out there, and I had half of a climbing stand. Didn't have the top half, just had the bottom half. And I would hug the tree and pull my feet up, that kind of deal. Anyway, I hear this deer coming. A guy had passed within 300 or 400 yards of me on a 3-wheeler. They didn't have 4-wheelers back then. And I heard that it just stopped raining. And I heard this deer jump. I heard this deer literally get up. And it starts moving through the brush down below me. I was kind of in a ravine down in there, a real thick spot. But there was one clear path where a logging skidder had been up and down. Yep. And I could see the tips of these antlers. And right before it stepped in that opening, I had a 30-30 lever action. And right before it stepped into that clearing, I cocked the gun, and it stepped up there and looked at me, and boom, I shot it right in the chest, facing me, and it just collapsed. And I was like, man, it's a good deer. Never thought that much about it. I mean, it was all about the meat. I got down and went down to it and looked at it, and it was a giant. I never seen anything like it. 27 points, 20-something inches inside, double drop tines, double brow tines. Wow. It was a beast. I'll send you a picture of it. But anyway, I had a buddy hunting with me, and he came over there and said, man, you got to go enter that thing in these big buck contests, which back in the day, this was at 1981. Every car dealership, every sporting goods store had these big buck contests. So we field dressed it. I packed it full of ice, and I took it to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to Steinberg's, which was a huge sporting goods store, entered it there. And I was watching them score this thing with pencils and rulers. I didn't know anything about that. Yeah. Anyway, long story short, I entered it in 6 or 7 big buck contests. Of course, it won them all. And I won like 6 or 7 rifles with scopes on them. Right. I couldn't believe it. Here's the funny part of the story. Anyway, I sold all those guns, and I gave the money to my wife. We needed some stuff. I'm telling you, we were poor. Yeah. We got washers and dryers and all that. Anyway, the next year in September, early September, I'm out mowing the grass, and she comes out there with a glass of tea and taps me on the shoulder, and I stopped. She said, shouldn't you be out scouting for deer? Like I'm going to go kill another 210-inch whitetail. But she liked that part of it. But anyway, I went to work for the sporting goods store, and, people didn't know me from Adam. They had heard about the deer, and they would come in and say, did you hear about that big deer that was killed up in Jefferson Canyon? I said, yeah, I heard about it. Well, he was poaching. Or he was hunting at night, or he was on it just went on and on. I was like, really? I never would say anything. Right. And one of the things I won in the big buck contest was a free taxidermy mount. This guy mounted him. I'm not going to mention his name because this ended up in a lawsuit. But anyway, I found out later while he had it mounted, he made a mold of the rack, and he was selling them. First reproduction you ever heard of. This was like 1983. And I called the guy, and anyway, I was more mad that he didn't cut me in on the money. But anyway, he went out of business. Well, 2 or 3 years later, I wrote an article about that. I had a syndicated newspaper column around there and a couple other towns. And I mentioned the taxidermists by name. And my whole premise of the article was people are too fired up about antler size. And this is in 1983. Well, he sues me for defamation of character, which the judge finally threw out. Another thing, I went to work for Primos after this. And like I told you, 83 or somewhere in there. And I had the deer in a booth at the Buckarama, which is a huge deer show in Atlanta. And these 3 very well known, you would know all 3 of them if I named them, walked down the aisle. One of them thumped the deer and said, that's one of them fake deer reproductions. And he walked off. And anyway, I went around and got to him. I said, hey, I introduced myself. I said, I killed that deer. It's the real deal. And he said, yeah, right. But anyway, I had so many negative things about it.
Right.
I was like, you know what? I ain't going to ever get caught up in that, because that was not even close to one of my favorite deer hunts. Now, it changed my life a little bit because of this big deer and all that, but it basically was a fluke. And I think a lot of the giant deer that get killed, not nowadays because of food plots and QDMA and all that, but back then, if a giant deer got killed, it was probably a fluke if they told the truth about it. But
right.
It kind of changed my outlook.
I can see how you got there. That's supposed to be a happy moment, and it's turned negative. Something.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
So I just took it. I hang it up in my house now and never tell anybody about it. It's very funny. Nobody would ever dream I killed a deer. I was in a meeting not long ago when people were, the marketing comments were going in that direction, and somebody said, well, we'll never know what it's like to kill a 200-inch deer. Ain't nobody in this room ever even seen a 200-inch deer. And I just kind of raised my hand real slow and said, I killed one. The guy like to fell out. No, you didn't. But it's so much more to it than that. Nothing wrong with using the score as a reference in a conversation. I saw a 10-point down there in the cornfield by the fence row. How big was he? Well, he's a 140-inch deer. That's fine, but that shouldn't be the only thing we're thinking about. There's too much of that. Because I'm telling you, I've been producing TV for Mossy Oak since we had a TV show, and one of my major thoughts from day one was, don't offend anybody. And I ain't talking about anti-hunters. The guy that works down there at the gravel plant, or the guy that works at the paper mill, or the lady who checks her. I don't want to just put so many big deer in their face that they lose interest and go, you know what? I ain't never going to see one. I'm going to play golf, or I'm going white perch fishing. You want them to take the whole experience in. Your buddies, the getting ready's half the fun, the venison, which is still at the top of my totem pole. We don't talk about that kind of stuff enough.
Right. Very good points, guys. Very good points. What type of gear do you usually hunt with?
Well, when I'm home, I just bow hunt. That's all I do. And I've had the same bow now until about 3 weeks ago. I've had the same bow. It's a older model PSE compound bow. It's a Evo, one of the first ones they came out with, and set on it's probably on 58 pounds. And it's got two pins. I got a 20-yard pin and a 40-yard pin. The 40-yard pin's for coyotes or, some kind of predator way out there. And it's really simple. I've got a Whisker Biscuit rest on it. When the first time I saw a Whisker Biscuit, I was like, boy, that's pretty cool for a kid. And now I'm telling you, right. that is the best thing that's ever been invented for me.
Right.
For deer hunting. I still use a zero peep sight.
Yep.
And if you know what that is, it's got the rubber tubing on it. And I went out to Utah 3 years ago on an elk hunt with that bow, and there was a couple of really big time famous bow hunters in camp, lots younger than me, kind of making fun of the rig. You got a zero peep sight, that thing makes noise. And I shot an elk the second day. It ran about 80 yards and then just flipped over backwards. It died so quick. But anyway, it still works for me.
Yeah, teaching those young fellas about the old gear.
Well, you know what? I don't care what you use. My stuff, I know I ain't going to have to worry about anything but getting the deer killed. And that's all I worry about. So, once I get mine dialed in, I'm kind of done with gear, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I love to take I got a small pair of binoculars, because you start getting my age, you need them for one thing, but big believer in rubber boots. But, I'll have a backpack and it's got I always take the bow hangers, stuff like that with me. And if I'm going over to one of Toxie's places, I'll carry a good bit of stuff in my pack. When I go hunting on my farm, I don't really take anything. I can just leave with my rubber boots and my bow, and because I know my bow hanger's in the tree already, or the blind's got a shear in it. So I've never been a real big gear guy. I work really hard on a couple of things. One is getting that muscle in shape. The other thing is getting it quiet. And when I talk about quiet, I'm not talking about when it goes off. I'm talking about pulling it back. And if you want to know how loud your bow is, people never practice this. Wait till your wife, everybody's gone to bed, and the house is totally silent. Bring your bow inside when it's, whisper quiet, and then draw it back. Mm-hmm. And you'll hear what makes sounds. Now, that may sound like overkill, but I'm telling you, we deal with some pretty evil little deer down here. So I go the extra mile to make sure everything's really silent. Back in the day when we had to shoot aluminum arrows, I would actually wax mine arrows with furniture polish, to make sure they didn't make any, because that's the move. That move's getting that bow drawn back.
Right.
So I worry with that kind of stuff. But other than that, I just kind of go hunting.
Gotcha. So you're kind of a minimalist at when you're on your stuff, and then pack a little bit heavier when you're out.
Yeah, when you go with Toxie, Toxie's got a lot of land down here now. Toxie's a great, great bow hunter. He doesn't get to go as much. His passion is duck hunting, and he's got boys that love to duck hunt, but he's still good at it. But you never know about Toxie's tree stands. You better take you an extra strap. You better take you a folding saw. You never know, because he'll find that good spot. He'll hang a stand. He may not ever get in it. So you better go prepared when you were Toxie.
Right.
My place, I can leave my little shop walking, and I'm good on my place. So
gotcha.
Different down here. So
that's pretty funny. Very good. You I asked you in the beginning to think of a memorable deer hunt. You've been on a bunch. Certainly sounds like that 200 incher is a memorable deer hunt, but you also said it wasn't the best deer hunt you'd ever been on. Can you think of a memorable deer hunt that you can take us on a play-by-play, step-by-step, detailed type description so we can feel like we're there with you?
Well, it's been so many. My wife is from Waukegan, Illinois, originally. Never been around a hunter or anything. So getting her first deer was a 6-year ordeal, and I won't even go into that. Killing the giant 200-inch deer, that was pretty special. Wasn't my favorite. But as far as just getting absolutely blown away, it would be one of those grandkids. I got 3 of them now. Walker killed his first buck with his dad, his first deer with his dad. The middle one, his name's Matt. And Matt's quite the little guy. And I had him shooting a crossbow when they were 5, if you can believe that. I had it set up one of those tripod things, Caldwell shooting pad thing. But anyway, he would practice. And I said, now, when you get ready to go, you let me know. And it was actually, deer season was open. And he was out there shooting the crossbow. It was a PSE Fang, and it was kind of heavy, but he could shoot the fire out of that thing. And it was like 3:30 in the afternoon. He said, Pop, I'm ready. And I said, really? I said, well, let's go. And I painted his face up, and I grabbed a video camera and all my stuff, and we went back to this little food plot 200 yards from my shop, and I got it all set up. And I thank God I took a video camera with me, but we were sitting there, and before we left, he drew a stick deer on a piece of notebook paper with a pencil, kind of looked like a little horse or something. He said, now tell me again exactly where to shoot it. So I drew an X on that stick deer thing. And when we got in the blind, he stuck it up behind the fiberglass pole. And I said, that's so cute. I was just kind of filming him for his mom more than anything. Didn't have any intentions of killing the deer. Kind of got in there late. Anyway, 2 deer pop out, and they are the perfect deer. They're yearling does, not fawns. They're about 90 pounds. Nobody's got a fawn with it.
Yep.
And they're feeding there about 30 yards. And I said, and he's got 2 dots on that crossbow scope. One's at 20, one's at 30. And I get him set up. And I said, man, can you see it? He said, yeah, Pop, I'm on it. I'm on the one to the right. And so I got the video camera out another hole, and I look, and it's on the deer. And anyway, I said, now, when you get that bottom dot right there, you shoot. Boom. And he 10 rings this deer at 30 yards. He's 5 years old. Well, I freaked out a little bit. I turned the camera. I got some reaction from him, and we sat there a minute. And I'm explaining to him about waiting and all that. And he says, he says, Pop, we need to say a prayer. And I said, okay. So we took our hats off, and he said, dear God, please help me find that deer. It's my very first one. Have a good week. Amen. and why I didn't film that, I don't know. But anyway, we got out there. I sent his dad a text. They live right 2 pastures over. His dad was out there doing something. His dad showed up, and we walked the 50 yards and got the deer. And I don't ever remember being that fired up. My wife was there, her mom was there, and it was just like to see that little 5-year-old do everything just right and go through the practice sessions and all that stuff was just, it was like an out of body experience to me. And I've killed some nice deer, but it was like that 90-pound doe with a 5-year-old was it for me. So
that is pound for pound one of the best deer stories I think I've ever heard.
Have a good week. Amen.
I mean, it was priceless.
Yes, sir.
Oh, that is priceless. Very
and
good.
People talk about crossbows and stuff, but to them at that age, they're bow hunting. It doesn't matter if it's a compound bow or not. We got to talk about broadheads and fletchings and blood trails and all that kind of stuff. And all I want to do is have that available for them.
Right.
Now, if they get the bug, that's a bonus. If they don't, I tried my best. So.
Right. Good point. Very good point. Well,
Yeah.
I've got 10 rapid fire questions for you, cuz I think you might be familiar with them, but let me run these by you.
Yes, sir.
All right. What's your number one hunting tip of all time?
Spend more time finding dirt than practicing your trade. And by that, I mean, and I've got places like this. People think, I'm not going to go hunt that public land. It's awful. I can't afford this lease. I can't afford this outfitter. You can still find places to hunt if you go knock on doors, go hang out at the co-op, stuff like. I had to do that my whole life, especially for turkeys and deer hunting too. But if you'll spend more time finding good places to hunt, you're going to be more successful. Now that takes a little work, takes a little PR. Sometimes you may have to go help somebody cut some firewood or something, and that sounds corny, but buddy, that's the better your dirt, the better hunter you're going to be. So I say spend 90% of your time finding a place and then 10% of the time scouting it and getting ready.
Gotcha. All right. Excellent tip.
All
right. We all have these things that we go into the woods without sometimes, and it drives us crazy if we don't have something with us. Sometimes it's useful tools. Sometimes it's just a good luck charm. Do you have something like that you can't hunt without?
Yeah. Well, I got a couple of things. One of them's a lucky buckeye. And why I consider a buckeye lucky, I don't know. We don't have them down here that I know of.
I was going to say, you're a little out of range there.
Yeah, my wife picked them up somewhere, and I got one I've kept up with forever. But, on the seer side, it'd be binoculars. If I got binos, I can do anything else that I need done. But I love binos because it keeps me from moving much. So I'd say binos would be number one.
Okay. All right. Very good. What's your biggest pet peeve in life?
Rude behavior. Just, sets me off. Maybe it's my upbringing or something, but I hate to see stuff, it's just rude behavior. Sometimes I'll say something. The older I get, the more I do say. But, it's like ladies first, open the door for the lady. We're cooking at the hunting camp. Hey, ladies first. People using profane language in front of women. Just rude behavior sets me off sometimes.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. How old are you today?
63.
63.
That's bad, isn't it?
That's not bad.
Beats the alternative. Yeah, beats the alternative. I'm still bow hunting, man. I feel good about it.
You're right. It beats the alternative. It sure does.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you're 63, and what would you tell the 33-year-old Cuz Strickland?
Be good to people. The nicer you are to people, the more they'll want to help you. And I don't care how smart you are. You're going to need help. I've never been scared to answer questions. So the more somebody likes you, the more you're going to learn.
Okay. All right. Excellent. You're at a hunting convention somewhere in the world, and a stranger comes up to you and asks you what you do for a living. What do you tell them?
Tell them I'm a hunting TV producer. I still feel like that's the majority of my job is producing television and now social media. But I always love to throw the hunting thing out, especially if I don't know them.
Yeah.
To see where it goes, because I'm always up for that debate.
Gotcha. All right. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
This morning I had a ideal protein bar that has no sugar in it. I'm watching my sugar, and that don't mean I won't eat a hamburger steak and gravy for supper, but I try to do right at breakfast. It was a protein bar.
Okay. All right. Excellent. You can have your own billboard on the side of the highway. It's a blank canvas. You can put anything you want on it. What would it say?
If you really love animals and the environment, buy a hunting license.
I like it.
That's where all the money comes from. People don't understand it and usually won't believe you, but if they research the Pittman-Robertson Act and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, anybody else, they'll come to realize that hunters put their money where their heart is, and they don't.
Right. Right. That's a good point. One of our very first shows we ever did was about the Pittman-Robertson Act, and I thought it was important, so I'm with you. Very good. All right. If I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops into your head and why?
Probably Toxie Hayes, because I'm around him a lot, and I saw a guy who was working on the kill floor at Bryan Foods where they made sausage and bacon and stuff like that.
Yep.
And had a dream. And we were talking about this the other day. He's like, back in the day, we didn't think about the work. We just did it. And to me, that's success. If somebody doesn't let, people's decisions or things get in the way, he's very successful. And he's kept his family and his employees together. It's hard to beat that.
Gotcha. Excellent. What's a typical day in your life look like? Like when you go to work at a Mossy Oak, what's that like?
It's pretty laid back down here. I'm an early guy. I get up really early and come to work. And I got a lady that works for me, Kylie, downstairs. Mm-hmm. Her and I will open this building up. It's the TV production building. And it used to be a Western Auto Store, Main Street, downtown West Point, kind of like Mayberry. I'll go through emails and stuff like that. A lot of talking back and forth with the calendars this time of the year. Probably pet the labs. If all the video field producers are here, there's always a couple of labs running up and down. We go to lunch early at about 11 o'clock, get back at noon, take care of some business. And if it's hunting season, I'm going to be sliding on out of here about 2:30 or 3 o'clock. So it's not like that all the time. I spend a ton of time on the road, but if I'm here, and it's usually a phone call or two to Toxie asking him about food plot issues, or Toxie's a tree nerd, he's got the native nursery stuff, but I'll kind of ask him a question or two, but it's usually pretty laid back here.
Gotcha. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a good place to work.
Yes, sir, it is.
I like it. All right. And then what's a typical deer hunting day in your life look like? Or is that just part of your daily routine?
Well, if it doesn't involve clients or guests or a TV thing, if it's a good day, I live in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And we've got a nice house, and I've got what we call the man den. It's about 100 yards over there. We're next to what we call the tiny shop. And if it's really good weather, I'm going to ease on over there and spend the night, because it's all my hunting stuff's over there. I can watch the hunting channel. My wife locks the house up. We're good to go.
Nice.
And I'm going to see where the wind's going, and I'm going to lay down like I was 18 years old, and I'm going to toss and turn trying to decide which stand to go to for about an hour. And then I'm going to wake up and I'm going to leave there walking. And that's the coolest thing ever. I can get to all but maybe two of my stands by walking. It takes a little while. And I'm going to hunt till about whenever. Deer don't move that good down here in the morning. I'm going to come back. I got chicken, so I'm going to go by the chicken coop, grab me a couple of eggs and fix some breakfast. I'm going to hang out and do a few chores, and I'm going to be back in the stand about 2:30 and sitting there with a wind in my face, dreaming about big deer that probably ain't around there, and hopefully shoot a big old fat doe and then do the recovery. So it's pretty laid back, but I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I don't put any pressure on myself.
Beautiful. I love that. No, that's the 10. That's the 10 rapid fire questions, Cuz. Thank you.
Good. Well, I appreciate it.
So what's on the horizon for you, Cuz, and Mossy Oak? Where are things going?
Toxie's like I say, Toxie's pretty interesting. We got the second wave is in place now, the next generation, and Toxie's, he's given me some great advice along the way. It's kind of hard to step back because you can see mistakes fixing to get made, and he's like, look. Let's let them eat, do this and that. And I've kind of become kind of a mascot. Toxie ain't going to do things he don't want to do. So when it comes to going to speak to the NWTF I do all that kind of stuff. And now I'm on the board of QDMA, which I've always loved. I especially love them now because they're kind of changing their messaging a little bit. And they've always been a great group, but we need that big group for deer hunting, just like we do duck hunting and elk hunting and turkey hunting. And they're coming on strong. So I'm gonna concentrate harder on being a messenger. Again, that's why I kind of embrace social media. I'm going to preach about the fun and the good in hunting, the conservation part of it, what we do, what it would look like without it. And I'm going to concentrate on that message and more than how big was the buck you killed last year?
Right.
Because, I just think that's the most important thing we can do once we get to this stage is to pass it on and give good advice. So I'm going to concentrate on being a better messenger.
Excellent. I like that. That's a very good message, being a better messenger.
Yep.
Very nice. Well, how can we reach you if we haven't covered enough here in the last hour or so, and people want more information about you or what you've got going on? Where can we go take a look?
Well, I got a YouTube channel, and I try to post there once a week, maybe, but I ain't going to put anything up there unless I was doing something. But it's called Cuz411. Putting stuff up now from my elk hunt with the Primos crew, and this is all behind the scenes. This isn't a TV production.
Okay, all right.
This is like the real deal, the road trip, what's going on,
the raw footage, the vlog kind of stuff. This is what all the young kids do.
It is a vlog, and you can see it there. I have Instagram, which is Cuz Strickland, and same thing on Facebook. And my email, which I love reading email, is really easy. It's rstrickland@mossyoak.com.
Very simple. Got it. Excellent. Cuz this has been an absolute honor and a pleasure and a blast getting to talk to you, and you're a great storyteller, and I love where you've been. You've got a rich history, and you appreciate many of the things in the hunting world that I do.
Well, I do. It's easy for people to take things for granted. I don't. We entertain so many soldiers and Navy SEALs and wounded warriors and stuff like that it's easy for me to see things that are what I call a defining moment. And to see how small we are in the big picture of things. And I can't tell you how much I admire the stuff that y'all are doing on the podcast, getting those messages out, keeping an open mind. It ain't just about big deer. It's about a whole lot other than that. So my hat's off to you guys as well. And been an honor to spend some time with you, Jay.
Well, I appreciate Cuz coming on the show and telling us about his life. I have been a fan of his work without knowing I was a fan of his work for quite some time. And I can tell you, I could not get enough of that Mossy Oak hunting the country back in the 90s. I had TNN on all the time, and if I heard that show pop up, I mean, granted, TV is a lot different today than it was then, but man, I was glued to the television set when I heard those words. I certainly wish Cuz the best of luck in his continued pursuit of being hands-on with Mossy Oak. I do love the Mossy Oak brand and the pattern, always have, and looking forward to hanging out with my new friend, Cuz Strickland, over there at Mossy Oak. Dusty, do we have a Chubby Tines tip of the week? Dusty, do we have a Chubby Tines tip of the week this week?
Yes, I do, Jay.
The Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, used firearms, bows, used bows, located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
You're a public land hunter. You walk in and you see tree stands and for people and activities. People's been through there. Hunters have been through there. Just because you see that, don't get discouraged. Keep a positive attitude and go in there and go beyond where you see the foot activity. Too many times where I hear guys that hunt public land tell me that, hey, man, I went and checked my spot where I normally hunt, and there was footprints in there. It looked like somebody just been through there that morning. And I said, that's a good possibility. They may have been there. But did you go beyond where you thought they might have went? Well, what do you mean, they say? I say, you got to get a little bit beyond where the average guy goes. And they said, well, I never really thought about that. I seen footprints and just said the heck with it and rolled out of there. And I said, no, you can't be like that. You got to stay positive and you got to dig a little deeper.
Right.
So if you're a public land hunter and you're walking in, let's say you're going in a couple hundred yards, you're seeing footprints and maybe you're running somebody's tree stand that they left up, and you got to go beyond that. You got to look at the big picture. Most guys are not going to put the effort in to walk farther back in that public piece of land and hunt. Maybe you got to get there a little earlier to make that farther trek, but in the long run, it'll pay off.
Awesome tip, man. Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out here in the studios with me?
Shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. You can look me up on Instagram and Twitter @ChasingAntler, Facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors. Jay, where can the people reach out to you when you're not on the mic?
Likewise, you can shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com, and you can visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Twitter, which is twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Instagram, instagram.com/bigbuckregistry, and YouTube, which is youtube.com/bigbuckregistry. On YouTube, you can listen to all of our podcasts in their entirety. As far as videos are concerned, it's a boring video, but the audio content is there, so you can actually listen to our podcast. You can also listen to all of our live shows that we've done on Thursday nights when we do them, and we've gone back and re-interviewed a lot of our previous guests we had on the show just to put a face to a voice, let's put it that way. You can always listen to our show on other places as well, not just YouTube. We're found on iTunes, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, and Blubrry. And if you would like to submit a buck to our page for consideration and be featured on our page in front of 250,000 diehard deer hunting fans, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all of the instructions will be right there. I think that's pretty much everywhere we're at. I think that's a wrap, Dusty.
That's a whole lot of big buck, Jay.
Sure is. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.